It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of TAXITV Live. My timing sucked today. Today we're doing Navigating Today's Music Business. It's much more than the notes, and I stole half that title from our guest today, Mr. Brian Ralston.
Hello. Thanks for having me on, Michael.
Yeah, my pleasure. Man, oh man, I met Brian because I was researching another possible panelist for the Road Rally. Let me make sure we're actually broadcasting because I don't see any movement in the chat room. And there we are. Okay. I was researching another potential panelist, and I saw him interviewing this Brian Ralston guy, and I thought, well, Brian is far more interesting than the guy interviewing him. So I reached out to a very good mutual friend of ours, and she goes, oh, yeah, he's like family to me. Let me hook you up. And she did. And I got to say, Brian was one of my favorite interviews out of all road rallies. Maybe not as good as interviewing Jeff Emmerich, the Beatles engineer. Took second place to him. But it's just Brian has this gift for understanding everything in our world and being able to articulate it in a very, very clear, precise way. But you should know that Brian is also a Hollywood film score composer and is now getting into film production as well. So he sees things from both sides of the fence. You also teach at UCLA. You do a class at UCLA Extension, and you do classes outside of UCLA Extension, right? And like mentoring stuff.
I do them privately. I do little private business seminars for about our industry as well. So, I call it privately. I say it's demystifying the music business or the film music business or the composer business, however you want to say it. At UCLA Extension, it's the business of film music that is in their film scoring program. That program is much more catered directly to film score composers.
Right.
But I've even had some attorneys actually take that class.
Did you charge them $500 to $800 an hour?
I wish, right? I probably should have a rolling fee for them. No, I mean, there's a lot of attorneys that take UCLA Extension programs for kind of a continuing education type thing, and some of them want to get into the music licensing side of what we do, and they feel like taking my course kind of lets them hear a little bit about what composers deal with. So, but that's always exciting when you have people in your class that are not normal students. We've got some 20-year-olds and we've got 15-year-old industry veterans in there, and so it's very humbling to be up there talking with everybody. So.
I would contend that the vast majority of music attorneys really know squat about the music licensing side, the indie music licensing side, and the music library side. I've met very few that they're used to dealing with major label artists licensing something for a big tentpole movie, for $500,000 or whatever. They're not used to here you go, use it gratis, and we'll just take the back end from our PRO. They don't live in that world.
It's a very specialized, area of entertainment law, music entertainment law specifically. And I will say, film production attorneys too don't really know as much about the business side. So when you're given contracts from the production company to work for them, often the language is going to be in the favor of the production company. But the language around music licensing or your work for hire agreement as a composer or whatever is often written in a way that is like, this is murky or not enough, or doesn't give me anything back. It's written in a way that you definitely need to have a music attorney look at it. And, and I would even encourage people, as I do in my class, to get used to reading that legalese language themselves. Yes, you always want an attorney to look at it, but the more you read yourself, the more you can understand what you're being presented with, the more you can kind of take control over things. I think the best way to negotiate with people is to really find out what it is they want.
I've got a way.
And then find, and sometimes they say they need to own everything. I need to own everything. but really that's not what they want.
Right.
They're just being told they have to own anything because it's the easiest pathway to get what they want. But what they really want is to not be encumbered by any future sale or distribution or whatever. So if you were to have a license agreement that gives them all of those rights, then the whole collecting publishing thing, it's like, oh, well, we were never going to do that. I mean, of course, Warner Brothers does that, but like small independent films are probably not going to have an entity set up with BMI or ASCAP to collect all of that stuff in perpetuity. That's not what they were fighting about. They were fighting about they don't want your music to uphold a sale to another territory around the world somehow.
Right.
And so if you can figure out these things of what people are really wanting, you can come to a better negotiating standpoint where everybody gets what they want. It makes the deal more complicated to write out, which hence the attorneys you need. But
I found a great way. There are two things in business that I'm not good at, that I'm embarrassed to admit publicly, but I'm not good creating spreadsheets. I can read them just fine. I just don't have the patience when I highlight a cell and it screws everything up. And the other thing is reading legalese. Although for years I went through 5 years, went through a protracted lawsuit that I became an expert in a certain field of law. Even my lawyer said, you now know more than I do about this. Mm-hmm. ChatGPT. I was about 9 months ago working on a contract, and I can't remember what it's for now, but I remember reading parts of it going, I'm of reasonably high intelligence, moderate intelligence, let's say, and I didn't understand stuff. I happened to be out of the country, 10 hours ahead of the attorney, so I didn't have a good time to contact him. So I just dumped it into ChatGPT and said, explain this to me in English. And what I got back from it was really, really good. And I never had to ask the attorney anything, and he was charging $800 an hour. Yeah. So it probably saved me that $800 hour.
I think that would be a great use of that. I would shy away from asking ChatGPT to write.
Oh yeah, no.
But to take existing language you're presented with in a contract and say, can you explain what the ramifications of this paragraph mean, or something like that? I think ChatGPT would do a great job of explaining what that means.
Yeah, it's exactly what it literally took the entire thing, paragraph by paragraph, and wrote in plain English what it meant. And then I was able to say, okay, well, clause 2 on page 1 says this, but clause 4 on page 7 says something that sounds like it flies in the face of that. Can you show me the difference? It was so helpful.
Yeah. And often, I have 2 different attorneys, one on the music side and one on the producing side. And I find there's differences in their styles, but there's some things that they do similar too. Is almost every attorney has templates for things that are kind of always in their wheelhouse. And that's how they quickly come up with, hey, I need a contract for a director, tomorrow for whatever. And they go to their template that they have for that, and then they tweak it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of their templates are, Frankensteined into the modern day contract that you have. Some of them, good attorneys are going to have those templates up to date based on how laws change and everything else. But some attorneys who that might not be music licensing, let's say, might not be their expertise. They go find or talk to another attorney to share something they have. And they have this language that is not necessarily exactly tailored for what you need in that deal that you're doing today. And that's where you get, sometimes contracts do contradict each other because they're sectioned, kind of copy pasted from other templates that they have. And then, they might be really good updating this part, but not this part.
It's good. Excuse me. You get charged for them writing the contract, even though you're 100% right. They use templates and Frankenstein. Now that's okay if it's an attorney that's Frankensteining, because hopefully they're reading it and going, "This works together." The danger in the indie musician, indie composer working or creating stuff for music libraries, a lot of music libraries are one-person operations, and they will Frankenstein contracts from that they received as composers or artists years ago. Stuff could be out of date, and they could have, paragraph 1 flies in the face of paragraph 2, and they don't know because they're not a lawyer. So, but they're getting people their composers in their catalog to sign these things, which are a joke.
Yeah. Well, and let me clarify too, on the lawyer side, a lot of those templates are probably deals or language that they originally created for some project in their past that they now bring forward. Oh, I just did a deal for a contract, for a director a year ago. Let me bring that out and then tweak it for today. So it's not like they're going online and buying template of content. Like a lot of their stuff, they are very particular about their language and how they do it. A lot of them take a lot of pride in how they write their clauses and phrases. But I do know for the music side of things, just like you were saying, one of my attorneys, was working on cases, and she was, she's been consulting with me on my musical opinion on some things, because there are music library composers who are still to this day, 2025, contributing music to libraries under a deal that they signed 15 years ago.
Right.
And that deal 15 years ago had zero language about AI and algorithm use and training and all this other stuff. And so now some of these music libraries, flash forward to today, are selling out to bigger music libraries or the BMGs of the world or whatever. And then that music suddenly gets sucked into, oh, we're using AI to train our library for this and that. And the deal that composer was on is some 15-year-old thing that never had language to give that permission to the library owner. And it's kind of a legal mess right now.
Yeah.
Actually. So
well,
anybody signing a new contract today is going to probably have language that they give away everything. But the old contracts, if you've been contributing for a while now, probably didn't have those clauses. And if you've never signed a new contract or updated that language that you were working under, you just had this, handshake agreement from 15 or 20 years ago to contribute so many tracks a month or a year to some library, you probably actually have more rights over those specific tracks than you think, because it doesn't deal with a lot of the issues we have today.
That sounds like a law practice for somebody just sorting all that stuff out, because you're right. I know composers that signed their deals 30 years ago,
Yeah. There's a big class action there, to be honest.
Yeah.
That a lot of composers would fall under.
And the lead plaintiff will get $5,000 and a McDonald's coupon.
Yep.
All right, so we are going to go back to AI because new developments in the AI world. But let's start out with the bullet points that I put in the letter that went out to everybody. So I want to go back to something I really enjoyed you bringing up at the Road Rally, which is building your brand as a composer, because I contend that so many musicians are stuck in the record company paradigm of the 70s and 80s, maybe even early to mid 90s, of if I just make great music, people will get it, they'll love me, they'll use it. And it goes so far, well, as the title that I half stole from you today, it's much more than the notes. It is. There's so much more. So why don't you just take the ball, run with it on building your brand as a musician? And if you could put it in the context or framework of the people in the chat room, the people watching this show today are independent musicians, most of whom work by themselves, maybe collaborate with some others. They work from home studios. They've probably never made any significant money in the music industry before, maybe playing live gigs, but they've never scored a film. They've never had a $50,000 piece of music license for a TV commercial. How they don't even think of themselves as a brandable thing, but you do, and I think it's really wise that you do. So lay it on us.
Well, I mean, this goes back to, and what we talked about a while back, is the entrepreneurial nature of our business. So let me start out first. So forgive me if this gets into the weeds before I get to the point here. I like to sometimes compare what we do to investment. If you're a restaurateur and you're starting a restaurant, you're going to probably spend a lot of money before you even open that restaurant and serve or sell a plate of food. And you're going to hire staff, you're going to develop a menu, you're going to rent the location, you're going to have to put in all the gear, you're going to have to develop a menu, you're going to have to start to advertise, you're spending millions probably of dollars, and you haven't sold one plate of food. and then you come to opening day, you've marketed it, you've you know, made samples, you have an employee go out on the corner with a plate of samples, come on in, have lunch, blah blah blah, you know, and you're gonna do all this stuff before you sell a plate of food. And so there is an investment certainly in yourself that is not unlike the restaurateur of you being a composer, that you are an entrepreneur, you are building your business, you're building what you are known for, and there's going to be a lot of investment that you have to make in yourself to do that, in your gear, in your ability to produce content, in your ability to produce broadcast quality stuff. Now the bar for that has been set much lower than it used to be, because a really powerful computer is a lot cheaper today than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
We can, in our homes, I mean, this studio I'm in is in my home, and I have an ice booth over here, and I've got my Shure microphone and a bunch of other stuff. I can produce everything I've produced. I was done essentially out of this room, and it's in a very affordable way, right? So, but it's still a ton of money. So first off, you have to invest in yourself and you have to build that brand. Second, you're going to have a reputation that you're going to have to build. And I like to tell people in my class at UCLA, you're breaking into the business of tomorrow, not the business of today. So you have to think about who are tomorrow's filmmakers and directors, who are tomorrow's hit producers, if you're going to pitch a song to, music supervisors who you want to pitch a song to get in. And you have to build a relationship with these people. Now, typically when you're young, they're young, everybody's still growing together, and that goes a long way. Trust takes a long time to build. And part of your brand and your reputation, in my opinion, is also, are you dependable? Are you reliable? Do you keep showing up? Do you deliver on time? Do you deliver on budget? You never went over budget. You didn't have to ask for more money. When they asked you to rewrite that song or rewrite that hook or rewrite that theme 20 different times, did you do it with a smile? Those are all part of your brand. How you respond to that, how you do that. You are in the music industry. You typically, you can be responsive to a label that might own you because you're releasing a contractual label, but a lot of musicians write songs as expressions for themselves. An album has meaning for themselves. In the film industry, you are typically the music expert hired to solve the music problems, and you are in a collaborative world, and the music you are creating is really the vision of the director. They just are hiring you, the expert, to create the music they want, not necessarily the music.
Not unlike an actor delivering lines
Correct.
that somebody wrote. It's your interpretation of their work.
Correct. So when people get hired to do that, and I'm not just talking film score underscore, but even there are known people that write songs for things. James Horner was rather a tunesmith with his scores, and always had Will Jennings as a lyricist and everything else that would write these pop Celine Dion songs for things. And a lot of those relationships were really strong because they had such a trust that was built over years and years and years. Music supervisors and directors keep going to people like that. So you will find people have amazing careers in our industry who not necessarily are the best composers, songwriters, but they are the best well-rounded package of everything. They do great music, but they also have a great attitude, and they also are not difficult to work with, and they love being in a room with you for 3 months at a time, sitting literally next to you over your shoulder while you're creating, because it is a collaborative thing. And all of this contributes to your brand of who you are and what you bring to the table. And if you are known being difficult to work with, even actors go through this. Sometimes you will be the there's the, I don't want to say any names. Some actresses that are known to be difficult to work with, some actors that are known to be difficult to work with.
There's actually a name for it. It's the Charlie Sheen effect.
Yeah. And and they might, they have a certain level and they peak, and then they feel like they're a little invincible, and then all of a sudden no one wants to work with them anymore, and they literally do fall off the planet, so to speak, from getting work. And that happens with music people too. So all of this is part of your brand. And you notice I haven't even really talked about music creation yet. This is all
Right.
the other stuff. And then when you get to the music side, everyone is looking for something different, something unique. Your job is to invent something new. And so that is, and I know we'll get in more with AI, but that is kind of, in my opinion, the Achilles heel of AI, is that there is no one else on this earth like you. There is no one else that has your experience and your background and your musical background, your life history background, your relationship background, your relationship with your parent background, your relationship with your sibling background. Like, there's no one else that has that, infuse that, put that thing that makes you you into your music. You know, the example I gave at the Taxi Road Rally is, I have a really long history with and love of marching band and drum corps, and I was a trumpet player, one of the screaming trumpet players on the football field, during college and everything else. And when I get the opportunity, I've already done it a little bit, but I haven't done the big tentpole movie that's got a lot of money to play with. I would love to score something with a brass band or a marching band like instruments in the orchestra,
Yeah.
because those instruments are different. The horns have piston valves and not keyed valves, and they're bell front facing and not rear facing. And you could give those sections of the orchestra, if they're playing a different physical instrument, different kinds of lines than you would give a French horn. You could give them a run. You could give the horns a run that you would see in a marching band or drum corps world, and not in the orchestral world. Well, think about putting that concept into an orchestra. No one's heard that before, or if they have, it was Don Davis in The Matrix or something like that, where the brass is just insane. And so infuse your past creatively into what you do to try to invent or create something new, and that will become part of your brand as well. And if you've got something new no one's ever heard of that's uniquely musical, and you pair that with the knowledge of the business, and you're pleasant to work with and people enjoy being with you, you're dependable, you keep showing up, you develop on time, you turn in on time, you are almost unstoppable. And it is rare to find someone that is good at all of that. And I guarantee you, the ones who are at the top of their game, the John Powells and the John Williams and all them, are probably really good at all of that stuff.
I completely agree with you, and that's so applicable across the entire spectrum of the creative universe that we live in, down to the cameraman, the lighting guys, even guys, that are focus pullers or cable guys. Just a lot of it comes down to, are you somebody they can rely on and they like having you around? Literally, those are the two most important things. The talent is almost, on the creative side, the talent is, well, you said it, it can be less important. There are people who are very well employed because they show up in time and they're easy to work with and they're a pleasure and everybody loves working with them. We talked a bit, maybe quite a bit at the Road Rally about how I think I told the story of the best unknown composer I'd ever heard. I brought him to Universal Pictures to meet my friend Harry Garfield, who at the time was executive vice president of music at Universal. He worked right under Kathy Nelson, who was like the queen of all things music there. And he was blown away. He said, before you bring your friend in, have him score a couple of scenes of movies I've worked on. And he did an incredibly good job. And my friend Harry was blown away by his work. And then he looked at me and said, okay, Michael, tell him now why he's never going to do one, or why he's not going to do a big movie, even though he is equivalent to Hans Zimmer. The kid was that good. And I said, because the people putting up the money for the film only want Hans Zimmer because he increases the chances of success. And he goes, yep. So you've even somebody who's got massive amounts of natural or developed talent still has to start at the bottom and work their way up the ladder to become Hans Zimmer or John Williams. So
just about the talent.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Exactly.
the experience, it's the knowledge to know what to do when things go wrong, which comes from experience and comes from having done it hundreds of times, thousands of times.
And you're right about deliverables. I mean, you are on the film schedule. The film schedule is not on you because you had a bad week and had a little writer's block, and can't deliver.
Or to extend your Hans Zimmer example, what if you, the lowly composer, get in an accident, like a car accident?
Right.
And you still have to contractually deliver. That doesn't stop, right? When you go in and hire some of these big names, they know they are getting a studio full of employees, 30 assistants and all this other stuff that will still get it done.
Right.
And if you're a one person show, that might fly for a tiny independent movie that's kind of trying to find its way, but at the studio level, it's just not going to fly. So
Okay, so we've cleared the decks now and pretty much eliminated the immediate prospects of some unknown composer doing a big feature film, a blockbuster tentpole movie. What about those mid-level movies that are made for $5 or $10 million? That seems like, before I met you, it seemed like fair game for composers. Why are there less opportunities in that mid-level realm than there used to be?
well, I would say because they're not making the mid-level realm anymore, right? So, this story goes back to the death of home video markets, right? And so, there used to be with Blockbuster Video actually the rental store where you physically went in and rented a DVD and a VHS tape. Before that, there was this rental window where the studios would sell those DVDs and those VHS tapes for 100, 120 bucks each to Blockbuster. They'd buy 30, 40, 50 of them, put them on the shelf, and then they would rent them out for 2, 3 months in an exclusive window. And the amount of money of selling those tapes for that amount of money per tape, which was a large amount of money for an effectively early home video release, paid for the rest of that film. So if it had a theatrical release in the United States and it made a half or 3/4 of its total money back to release and promote that movie, you'd have this home video market that would make up the rest of it. When that went away and Netflix came in, tried to do some of that through the mail, which was the transition into digital, and then Blockbuster, everything just like a landslide just fell into digital streaming. Why are we doing this anymore? And then now the video rental market completely died. Blockbuster went bankrupt. Hollywood Video went out of business. And then there's Netflix standing, and with no competition left, Netflix is like, well, we're not going to do the mail thing anymore. Let's bulk up our servers and start streaming this stuff directly to people's homes. And when that happened, that there was no more a disc or a VHS tape that you could sell to an entity like Netflix for 200 bucks a piece. And so Netflix has their one digital copy that they serve out to millions of people. And it's a different model. It doesn't bring in the amount of money that it did before. So now that home video rental market is dead, and what do the studios need to do to make up for that revenue? They still need that revenue to totally pay for their movie. So they start to expand and release films overseas more theatrically. And so now you start to see theatrical releases in Asian markets and European markets that before had a US theatrical release and then only had home video the rest of the world. And now, especially like China, the markets for a theatrical release has exploded. They started working with companies in the AMC theaters of the world and even IMAX to develop theater releases, theatrical releases all around the world. Those international theatrical releases brought in a lot of money that would help cover the costs of things, but it also changed the kind of movie that we make, because now we're playing theatrically very expensive movies to different cultures and different crowds of people, and that have different histories. The history of the country is different. So films like Pleasantville, I like to say as examples, or Dances with Wolves, the very Americana background type drama stories that are heavily dialogue focused stories, don't play as well overseas. They don't play well in other cultures. What does play well? Action, adventure, horror, right? Especially superhero movies, movies that have long 15, 20-minute visual effects chase scenes with hardly any dialogue. You don't even need to know what people are saying to understand that story evolve. And so that basically changed the kind of movie that we were making. Certainly, there's a brand. We talked about branding. There's a branded property with comic book movies and everything else being made. The technology is such that we can do some pretty amazing things on screen. And maybe, now is the time to start telling those stories effectively. And that's where Hollywood went with that. So now we have these $100 million expensive tentpole comic book action adventure movies, and we have micro budget $1 million paranormal activity movies that occasionally break through as a hit, but didn't cost that much money to make. They were risky. And you have companies like Blumhouse, they're not the only one, that has this philosophy that we would rather make 10 $1 million micro budget movies. And if one of them hits, like a paranormal activity, and makes $300 million, that pays for all the other nine movies that didn't hit, and also pays for, our existence for the next 5 years as a company.
Yeah.
And so these micro budget movies become where the independent and the smaller film, the unique films are playing with budgets that are really low, and people getting paid $28 to work on them, and tentpole blockbuster comic book Avengers movies that are so expensive to make and so much money writing on it that they are controlled by, corporations and even though they're going to hire Steven Spielberg to direct it or whatever, they're still answering to Disney and Warner and Paramount and boards and everything else, and they have branding. Everybody has a say into what that movie should be and scenes they have. There was Age of Ultron was, I think, the first Avengers movie. They had significant money come from China, and they actually have scenes in that movie that were filmed with Chinese actors that took place in China as part of the story that were not part of the US release of that movie. But in China, they actually crafted scenes for the Chinese audience with known Chinese actors in it.
Because they wanted to have a hit in China so they could keep the tap turned on for that Chinese money for future films.
And of course that gets into their, the censorship and everything else. I mean, if you make them happy, they'll allow the film to get released there. If they're not happy with how things are portrayed, they might just say, you can't release that movie here. And so, and the money speaks. And so that starts to impact the kind of movie we make. So that you getting back to what your original question, that middle of the road, $10, $20 million, even up to $40, $50 million movie that kind of was the bread and butter of Hollywood, that, those actors that kept hanging around and you know their faces, but you can't think of their names, but they have a career, like they keep those kind of movies stop being made. Because the general rule of thumb if I put my producer hat on now, to produce a movie and to make its money back, you're going to spend 2 to 3 times the cost of making the movie to actually properly release and market, the movie. And so you have a $20 million movie, you're getting into the range of, if we don't make $60 million,
you haven't broken
$70
even.
$million, we're going to lose our money. Our investors are going to lose their money, and the CEOs. And chances are, with how whacked the theatrical markets are now and everything else, you might make 15 million, you might make 20 million, but you're not going to make 60 or 70. And so that $20 million movie doesn't get made because it's going to lose money over time. But yet a $1 million movie, especially if it's a horror movie, you can do that without even a named actor because of the genre itself kind of speaks. A $1 million micro budget movie, you release that, and if you have a hit and you make $100 million, even if you make $40 million, your threshold to make your money back was not so high. So any independent film about 5 million or under is much less of a risk, and much, I don't want to say it's easy. It's still hard to get funded, but it's a much easier argument to make. That's not a huge risk. Once you get into the $10, $20 million range of a budget of a film, then it starts to be like, I wish that were lower. We're probably not going to make our money back on that.
Is it still a rule of thumb for the micro budget movies that basically double your production budget to, if you spend $1 million making it, you should spend $1 million marketing it? Or,
Probably 2 to 3.
okay. Okay, so that's a thing too,
Yeah.
because again, it's analogous to the music industry, people that release their stuff on Spotify. And it was the same thing when people would press CDs at disc makers or whatever. It's like, look, I'm holding a CD that looks like a major label CD. Therefore, there's parity. I'm on an equal and level playing field with the major label artists because I've got this CD. Same thing is in their minds for releasing on Spotify and all the other streamers. But most musicians, going back to not thinking entrepreneurial, they think musically, they think artistically, they think creatively. Therefore, they think the music is just so good that people are going to be attracted to it, like my family and friends and myself. And they don't include a marketing budget or a marketing plan, which should be written well in advance of releasing on Spotify.
Yeah.
And now with AI music populating Spotify, at 100,000 new pieces of music a day, how the hell does anybody compete with that? Just you're not even competing against the individual pieces of music. You're competing against this giant sea of stuff staring in the face of consumers, which makes a choice even harder to make.
And I would, I don't play in this world, but I know people that do. But because I am much more in the film industry than the music industry from the music that I create. But from the people that I know that are music industry producers and everything else, like if you don't have a presence on TikTok, if you're not doing the whole daily little video release things and trying to build your following from that, and where people can see you as an artist and see how you create and what you release, and like you're just not even going to be in the game. And a lot of great songwriters don't have that part to their game, so to speak. They might write a great song with a great hook, but they don't have that living life on TikTok thing, which, and I don't want to say it's only TikTok. I use that as a euphemism for just all the social media platforms and everything. But like, that is such a big part of marketing and promoting and building your following today. And what's going to get excited from a music producer, and even on the film world, a music supervisor, it's like, yeah, this is a great song, but no one knows who they are. Versus, yeah, this is a great song, and they've got 500,000 followers on TikTok, and they've got like that little thing is going to push that person, that song, that entity higher. And it just is, because they're not just buying your song, they're buying your exposure, they're buying your brand, and they're buying your followers, because they know if your song's in this film, your followers are probably going to go check out the film. So they're buying your network when they license your song.
And that model was created by the big studios and the major labels, because they would work if they knew, I'm trying, think of an artist, Billie Eilish. If they knew that Billie Eilish was in the studio and had a release date of July 15th for her next record, they would be very excited to license her song for a film that was coming out shortly thereafter or that exact time, because they would get her audience to come see the movie, because the Billie Eilish song was the tentpole song in that tentpole movie. Absolutely.
That's exactly why Disney is having, 9 Inch Nails do their movie for Tron, for example. And, 9 Inch Nails is basically Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, right? But they've been scoring movies. I mean, they've been scoring Disney movies as, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Why on Tron is the music credited to 9 Inch Nails?
Right. Because they've sold 100 million records, and they want 20% of those people to come to the movie because they're in it.
That is a complete marketing pitch to get that music audience to come check out the movie.
Yep. Wow, we've covered a lot of good stuff already. Let's go into AI, because that will obviously eat up a lot of our time today. Brian and I were talking about AI right before we went on the air, because the big announcement a week or so ago about Warner settling Suno. But something. When I excuse myself to go to the restroom before we hit the airwaves today. As I was in the restroom, I was thinking, you know what, though? That's Warner Brothers Records. It's not Warner Chappell Music Publishing. They didn't sign on to. So that's different because it's two different relationships from two different parts of the industry. So I wonder if there will be some sort of, well, you can't really have a favored nations clause when one is a label and one is a publisher. But anyway, why don't you I'm going to sit back and just listen to you because I like that. Tell us about what you think about AI. Again, remember our audience are independent musicians that largely produce music for production music libraries. Do they have to be worried today? They have to be worried 3 years from now? Is it going to affect the record industry more? Will it affect the library industry? Will it affect indie composers? All of that. Just spill your guts, kid.
So my first question when someone wants to start talking about AI in any conversation is, what kind of AI are we talking about? Because I first want to define that not all AI is the same. And what I mean by that is there are AI tools that we use that are getting better, that are not generative in nature. They are not creating an output.
Like AI mastering would be a good example.
Correct. Okay. Correct. So, Isotope plugins use an AI algorithm to analyze the mix that you created that sucks and realize how to make it sound better with a more defined kick and snare and all this other stuff, and then out pops through the plugin a great mastered track, right? I mean, a little harder than that, but that's the premise of that, right? And so that's an AI algorithm, and you're using AI to help make that track better. But that AI algorithm is not making the melody, it's not making the lyric, it's not creating a copyrightable element. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about what is AI, we have to first talk about how are you using AI. The Copyright Office has two terms that they use to define what are appreciative or de minimis use of AI technology. Appreciative basically meaning if it was done by a human, would this be copyright eligible? A melody, a lyric, a story that you write, like for a script, a writer writes a story, like those elements, if done by a human, are copyright eligible. Therefore, if done by the AI, are not eligible because it is not created by a human. So appreciative content done by AI is, and I'm talking about the nature of the content. You cannot copyright an EQ curve that goes on to a file to make it sound a certain way, right? But you can copyright the melody. So typing in text or words, spooky music in key of C minor, output multiple melodies, you pick the one you like, that is not writing the notes. That is using a descriptive term. The AI algorithm is popping out the notes. Therefore, the notes created were done by a non-human, the AI algorithm, and therefore it's not eligible for copyright. De minimis use is, like we're talking about, the mixing elements, taking a blurry image and making it more sharp because of the AI algorithms looking at the pixels and everything else. That is not a appreciative use. It would not be copyright eligible anyway. So those AI uses in your content do not affect the copyrightability of what you did, and basically de minimis use is okay. Appreciative use of AI generated is not.
Who's going to check and be the arbiter of what's appreciative and what's de minimis?
We are in the wild, wild west of this part of what you're asking. So right now on the copyright form, when you fill it out to register copyright for something, it says, was AI used in the creation of this or any element of the creation of this? And basically asking you to define what element was AI used. And it's on your honor. And that's where someone will probably just lie and say, well, no, it wasn't, right?
People being people, yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's, the thing about that is those forms are essentially like sworn testimony. So if something comes back to bite you in the future, it is learned in the future that an AI algorithm created that. It is learned in the future that it was not human created, or your melody was not human created, or your lyric was not. And you go back to the copyright form, someone sues you and say, hey, you stole this. And your argument would probably even be, no, I didn't violate your copyright. I just put it into Suno and it popped out an algorithm. I didn't, like if any of that goes against what you registered, you're probably putting at risk your registration completely. The Copyright Office is just going to likely cancel the copyright registration of that element, and now it's going to be public domain, and it's not going to have the protection because it either wasn't created by a human, or there's question that it wasn't created by a human.
While we're on that,
yeah, you don't want to be put in that position. If you're writing a song or a score or a piece of music for someone else, you are saying on your contract, everything I create for you is copyright clear. It is unique to, a unique piece of music or work or lyric that I have created, me, the person, the human. And so you are signing in a contract, an agreement that you're providing something that is copyright clear and is ownable. And if at the end of the day that registration is proven false, you're in a world of legal trouble, basically, and you're probably putting yourself and that song and everything else at legal risk.
You said finish this thought, and I've got a big question for you.
No, yeah. No, I think while right now it's on your honor, I mean, I would love that we push our legislators to further define those copyright registration questions, not only asking what was AI generated, but what tool did you use to do that? So if someone says I use Suno to whatever, that's a generative thing, and that can further cause an investigation to figure out what did Suno output? Was it some drum snare beat, or was it actually the melody that you were trying to license? And again, you can copyright register the song, just the elements that were AI generated are not part of the registration. So, but then again, you're creating a song that's like a Swiss cheese of copyright,
right?
That this part is and this part isn't and whatever, and it's a mess. And our entertainment industry relies on the protection of copyright and the ability to own and control this stuff. And none of the movie studios, none of the record labels are going to allow something to happen that they can't own and control. And if you're the one providing that for them under the guise that this is all ownable and controllable, I'm signing this away to you, or whatever your deal is, then you have to be able to stand by.
So I've got a question that I've never had a discussion with anybody I can think of about this aspect. You said public domain. And so what if you were to say, Suno, I'm trying to think of a public domain Christmas song, for instance, and you told Suno to create a reimagined version of It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas, or whatever might be a public domain Christmas song. You didn't write the words, you didn't write the melody, that's all PD, and we know that. And the master is created 100% through generative AI. Could that be licensed?
No. I mean, someone's going to try, obviously. But remember, there's not just the recording, the copyright of the intellectual property, but there's the sound recording copyright of the performance. So the performance is the audio is what's being output here,
right,
by the AI algorithm. And when you register for copyright, you can register your copyright in two ways. You can register the sheet music and say, I'm just registering the creation of the melody and the lyrics, and here's the lead sheet and everything else. You can also send an audio wave file and say, I'm registering the creation of everything and the sound recording. So you can do all three basically with the AI wave, or the wave file that you upload to them. And from the sound recording registration, you're also registering the song that is contained within that recording.
Right.
Because copyright is, you have to affix it to some medium first. That could be pencil to paper. That can be an audio wave file. That could be you singing into something. That could be a video. Any of that is affixing it to a medium, and then the medium is what you're uploading to register. So the sound recording of what you're registering from that AI output is not a copyright eligible performance. It wasn't performed by a live person. It wasn't captured by anyone. And so it was output by an AI algorithm. So the sound recording is not eligible per copyright rules. So you've basically now created a public domain audio recording of, you're arguing, a public domain song.
So you get bupkis.
Yeah. I mean, I joke that the actors deal with this in the same thing. There's that actress now, was it Tilly Harwood or something? It's like a complete AI actress that has an agent in Hollywood, and they're trying to sell her likeness to be used in products or used in a movie. And, it's the first AI actress. And I joke with people, and it's rather crass to say, and that's part of the joke, is that all it will take is one porn company to take her likeness and create product with it, and then the company that created her algorithm to then sue them. And then the courts are going to say, yeah, but you can't copyright control the likeness of something that is AI generated. So you've created an AI actress that is essentially the likeness of which is public domain. And then that will define for all of us, even in the music industry, that the output of this stuff is not copyright eligible. Now, I mean, that's all it's going to take is some court case to come along to define that output. First they'll have to prove it. But in the Tilly Harwood AI actress scenario, they're openly saying this is an AI creation. They're not being clear about, was there any human generated issue?
Right.
Like did a human in Photoshop or whatever draw her face and create this likeness, and then the AI made it three-dimensional? Or I don't that gets into the legal weeds that we don't know yet. Right.
And down the road, there's going to be AI incest and inbreeding. And Tilly Harwood, it's like, how many generations do you go back to find the genesis of Tilly Harwood? And by the way, she's doing porn. I think they should rename her Tilly Hardwood. But sorry, I couldn't resist.
Exactly, we knew it would go there from the example that I gave. But that's all it's going to take is someone to push the envelope to create a case where someone has to go to court to defend the AI content as, hey, we own that, you can't take that. And then, and then for them to lose. And quite frankly, there's already been a case where that's been lost. And that's the case of it was a monkey, orangutan, whatever, I don't know what species he was, who took a selfie from a camera of a photographer.
Yep.
And that photographer uploaded the photo to the internet, because the monkey is like smiling with the teeth and everything else, and it's like it's like, hey, this is a selfie. And that photographer started wanting to sell products with that iconic photo, and then other people popped up on their little Temu store or whatever it is and said, I'm selling shirts with that photo on it. That photographer started to sue these people and take a Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown notices. Hey, that's my photo. You can't do that. You can't sell shirts with my photo. That's my photo. And then the argument was made in court. You didn't take the photo. The monkey took the photo. You've even said that the monkey took the selfie. And it was that case's conclusion was that because a non-human took the photo is public domain. It is not eligible for copyright protection or registration. Therefore, the photographer did, in fact, lose the case, and that photo is out there. You can look it up on Google. Is free for anybody to use because a non-human created the photo. So we do actually, in the Tilly Harwood case, I would argue, in the AI generation of music, for any case that comes up, we do already have some case precedent about non-human created copyright eligible product that is void of copyright eligibility because it's not human created.
I watched The Age of Disclosure the other night, the Alien movie that's out on Amazon Prime. And it's 34 very high level, extreme people with unimpeachable credibility. And basically, they all agree. They're here. We've got the craft. We've recovered alien bodies. The government's been hiding it, and for various reasons, one of which would probably cause an economic freakout if, like President Trump went to a microphone tomorrow and said, by the way, aliens are here, because we have no way to defend ourselves from them, because everybody agrees that these things are flying at 40,000 miles per hour and our top speed is a couple thousand miles an hour. We have no way to defend ourselves. Anyway, I think they should have had an addendum to that documentary, which was aliens taking selfies. Are they copyrightable or not? Here I am with this human family at a barbecue.
Yeah. It would be not, right? Because there's but again, the one thing that could change all of this is a change in copyright law. It's a change in how the law is written.
Okay, so we know how fast laws are changed and how effective Congress is at doing that. I don't think it's possible for them to catch up with the speed at which AI on so many levels is moving. But let's say it does, then what happens to all the stuff that was created before AI, or the stuff in the middle ground where it wasn't decided yet, but it was created from this year to that year? It's such a legal morass. I don't see it solved anytime soon.
I agree with you, and this isn't a show about how politics and legislation works, but legislation kind of works slow, I think, by design.
Yeah.
Because and some people are frustrated by that, because it's like, we need a law to talk about this, and like Congress is designed to kind of go through the molasses of that whole process, so that so we don't on a whim make laws that are the flavor of the day, right? And so I think the law, the way it's already written, is that copyright is reserved for human creation only. And in my opinion, what we need as content creators, copyright creators, is to get involved with feedback to our legislators, our representatives, all that stuff, no matter where you are in the United States or the world, because Europe has a huge, impact on this in copyright as well. And encourage our legislators, if they're going to do anything, to further enforce that the human creation aspect is what is the requirement that we need to not get rid of, right? AI companies would love to basically get rid of all copyright, and to say, or to make the product of their AI algorithm eligible for copyright, where the AI company or the algorithm company creating it basically owns the copyright.
Right.
So that all these songs are owned by the AI algorithm that created it. They would love that, because there's a business model behind that. But again, it's the business model. If you can't have copyright ownership, it doesn't make sense as a business. And therefore, business is not going to invest in it or push things toward it when it's a lot of money going in to develop it and not any money coming back out of what did we do, right? And so even OpenAI was created originally as this open source whatever, and now it's all becoming not this open source thing. And so, and the reason for that is because they want to control it and to own it and to sell it and to license it and to do things with it, that when it's open source, it's not so sexy to build a business around that.
There is another layer of business, probably much less profitable, but worth talking about, which is the business of not paying for music. There, you being a film producer, gee, what if you could have music in your movie and not have to pay anybody for that? There's a business.
True, but then I'm registering a film that I want to copyright own and control and sell and license and make money.
Right.
That I have to tell the distributors, oh yeah, by the way, the songs in these 10 scenes we don't own. So we can't control it. We can't do whatever. Wow. By the way, if you release this movie in this territory around the world, they have a different copyright law there, and that this scene, the music in this scene, you're not going to be able to collect on it. You're not going to be able to do anything on it. Like, it's not.
What a mess.
It's not viable, which is why the distributor, if you make a film, the distributor is going to require a clean chain of title, that you prove either you own everything as a production company, or you have the license and the rights to use everything in this film in perpetuity throughout the known universe in every medium, blah, blah, blah. And that means the distributor then is free and clear to actually distribute this movie in the various territories that they want, and they're not going to get sued. And so you have to show that clean chain of title as a production company, as a filmmaker. Yeah. And if your music does not have, you don't have the rights, then, and again, even if it's a public domain composition, you're putting pomp and circumstance in your graduation movie, the recording itself has a copyright, unless you're talking about a recording from 1900, which is probably not in your modern day movie. And so the recording, you have to show that you have the copyright license or whatever to use that recording. So again, it's not just the public domain aspect of the notes, but it's the public domain aspect of the recording. And it's murky. And all these production companies, like if Warner Brothers releases a movie and they own all the music, then again, when those Q sheets are filed, ASCAP and BMI, they collect blanket licenses from networks, and then they pay those Q sheets out. Well, if Water Tower Music is getting money from those Q sheets, it's going back for a Warner Brothers movie with Warner Brothers artists on the Q sheet. It's going back into the Warner Brothers, overall bank. Yeah. And they don't want to get rid of that money. They don't want to have stuff played and it's not, getting collected anywhere. So they, again, will want the music chain of title to be free and clear. And everybody talks about like this, this settlement that you're talking about. Everybody is talking about the front end of AI and, the training part of AI and licensing, AI being trained on copywritten content and then being used to create other content that mimics that copywritten content. And the labels are saying, well, we should be paid for that. But they're gonna take their hit. They're gonna take their money. They're gonna get their license fee on the upfront, and then they're gonna be like, and we're done, because they don't care about the end product necessarily, because they got paid on the upfront of the training of it, right? So now, no one is talking about, in my opinion, the end product of whether it's even eligible to be copywritten in the first place. And that's the part that is the legal minefield, that if you're creating, no one wants to release an album that someone else can just take and steal. I always, like the Tilly Harwood thing, I always say to people about this AI song, and I'm like, I look forward to releasing my album of your AI song next year. Like because you can't protect it if it's public domain, both in audio form and the melody lyric form.
Let me pose another question, which is, if I don't speak French, and Taxi puts a brief out there looking for French cafe music, chanteuse music, and I take my male English version that I've not done anything on this track with AI. I've built the whole thing from scratch in my DAW, but I use AI to translate it into French from English, and I use AI to create a female vocalist singing it in French. Pretty good chance that vocalist is an amalgamation of 5, 10, or 1,000 different vocalists that were on major label product that they were allowed to scrape data from because they got paid for that. Where does copyright law fall on that vocal? First of all, on translate, I guess the translation is a tool. That's more analogous to using AI mastering. But the vocal being derived from data from legally, because that giant ass license has been granted by a major label. What do you think the deal is with that?
So, in the United States, we do not recognize neighboring rights as a thing. But everyone in the United States is eligible to collect it from around the world to other countries that do that. the AFM SAG-AFTRA Fund collects that in the United States for both actors and singers, people on recordings. Neighboring rights says that the concept of that is that there's an intellectual property to the performance of the work, and that the performer of the work, encaptured in that audio or video recording, deserves an royalty payment for the intellectual property of what they did. So an actor performing a role in a movie, Frank Sinatra singing New York, New York on that recording that's Capitol Records put out, there's an intellectual property to that unique performance. And the one they did on Monday night is different than the one they did on Tuesday night, is different than the one they did on Wednesday night. So each recording has a separate intellectual property performance of a work. So again, the United States does not collect this, but other countries do. I have film scores that I performed as a part of the orchestra that play in other countries that do collect this. Spain, Germany, for example, Brazil is another one. And I get a little check. It's not much, but sometimes I've gotten as much as I think of $1,500 a year on film music that I've been a performer on that have played in these other countries. So if you're registering copyright of that song that you human wrote, the melody you're registering, the lyric you're registering because you wrote the lyrics, let's say, but your recording of your sound recording, you would have to say in the registration of the copyright, the AI vocal in French is AI generated, is non-human. So you have to be upfront about that, on your honor again, but you're upfront about that. Therefore, the vocal portion of your AI recording is not what you're registering. It's not protected by copyright. To me,
Wow.
That's the performance part of it. Everything underneath it, if it's not AI generated, is not. You could even say that, if your guitar is AI generated and the vocal is AI generated, but your drums were real and the keyboard you played in or sample library or whatever you did, those things, those elements, those human performed elements would be eligible. The non-human element of the recording would not be eligible. And I would argue that there's a question that the neighboring rights, who are you paying that to? There is no person that performed that work. So if that work actually were in a movie or performed on the radio in France or whatever, Spain, and there was a neighboring rights royalty generated for the performers of that work, there is no human performer. So there's money.
Suno could get that too?
Well, see, I don't, to my knowledge, Suno wouldn't be eligible to register as a person collecting royalty for that thing. They would want to, absolutely they would want to, but the people that get paid on that have to be humans. You have to sign up and you have to give your social security number and all this other stuff. The money you get paid gets reported for tax purposes and everything else. And so if you're a non-human, you're not collecting that money as a performer. In the United States, there is legislation. They're even going to try again soon to pass legislation to recognize neighboring rights. When you hear that there's legislation about the musicians getting paid a royalty for when their recordings are on the radio, that's really what we're talking about. It's finally starting to pay royalties. The radio stations don't want to do this. They say it's going to put them out of business. They're already paying a blanket license to ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC for the intellectual property of the songs they show. Right. Now you're telling them they have to pay a royalty for the performers on the works as well, and they're claiming that it's going to put them out of business. And so, but if that legislation were to pass and we were to officially recognize neighboring rights in the United States, that would be a huge royalty potential for any performer on any work.
What's been the roadblock for why is the U.S. the only country that doesn't recognize neighboring rights?
It's not the only, actually, but it is a major one because entertainment is at the heart of one of the things we create and export to the world. You would think that we would recognize that here. It's all lobbyists and radio stations and people getting legislators to either care about this or not care about this. And the thing about our legislators, when you think about legislation, is that it's really easy to get someone in California, a legislator, a representative, to care about this stuff because the entertainment is our industry. But why does a senator or representative from Iowa care about this? Why does someone from Montana. And I'm not putting this all on the middle states of America, but it is such a vast country that it's a niche issue
To
that I
them.
think to them
Right.
but we need broad support of everyone to pass a bill, or it just gets presented and it sits there and it never goes to vote. And so it's really it's hard by design to get stuff passed that everyone has an opinion on or cares about. And that's where we need to lean on ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, the Recording Academy, the Motion Picture Academy, all these organizations. Dare I say, even Taxi. Everybody should be having lobbyists to like be a part of that conversation and to write letters to legislators and say, we are supporting this for this reason. We would like to see you support this for this reason, and get everybody involved. So
this is why I do shows like this and get people like you on the shows, because the education is so important. But I feel like it's a drop in the bucket because there are so many things. I'm a reasonably intelligent music and knowledgeable about the music industry. I have such a hard time understanding all the different ways that musicians can collect money. Next week's show is I'm having somebody from the MLC, the Music Licensing Collective, on, because it's another income stream. Most musicians don't even know about it, and if they do, they don't know how it works or how or why they should get paid. But I feel like most musicians are like the flyover states, the people in the flyover states not paying attention to issues that are a big deal for New York City or Los Angeles because of population density in those two areas, and laws affect them much differently than they do somebody who lives in Wyoming.
And it works both ways, right? I mean, people in LA aren't really caring about corn harvesting.
Right.
Right, and where cattle goes and what are the laws about that. That's where our food comes from. But at the same time, it's every part of it. So we have to make these people, legislators, representatives, understand why this is important. I've always said that we need to put things in the language of small business to legislators. And if we help them understand that we as content creators, as musicians, are really small micro businesses. I hire engineers, I hire musicians, I hire assistants, I hire people underneath me, and there is a pyramid effect, cascading effect of commerce, of people getting paid and hired. And in the United States, we don't make a lot anymore. Hopefully that will start to change. I mean, that's kind of the one thing that our current administration says they're trying to change. But we typically design stuff here and then have it made elsewhere in the world and then import it back for us to buy cheaper, right? And so one of the biggest things that we make intellectual property and export to the world is entertainment. It is our music, it is our movies, and those.
But that's not even being made here. So many productions are being done outside of the country. You and I've talked about, you doing scores in Prague or wherever.
But the intellectual property
starts here.
Non-tangible intellectual property starts here, and then our production companies try to figure out how to get the labor cheaper to go make it, and then the intellectual property, the companies that own it, the content creation of it is here. What makes it hard is it's not a CD, it's not a Blu-ray, it's not a car, it's a non-tangible good. It's an intellectual property. And that can transcend borders and be sent from by WeTransfer and everything else around the world to get worked on and come back, right? So the labor unions and everything else have a lot less stronghold on the creation of intellectual property in general, because we can outsource that easily and come back, and we don't even have to fly to another country to record music anymore. We can just do it. I can monitor it via Zoom and send the parts PDF, and they send me the Pro Tools session back, and it's done, right? I don't need to fly to London or Prague or whatever to record music. So that's what's changed that industry. But I still created I'm an American composer, American company, doing it most likely for an American film. It is an American intellectual property that is being created, and
let's go back to film composing because I would guess that probably 80% of Taxi's members who are creating cues for libraries um, would love to score a film, and so we've eliminated the tentpole film. That ain't going to happen. The mid-level films aren't a thing anymore, so we're talking micro-budget films, which we actually get. I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 briefs a year through Taxi. When filmmakers discover how much better the music is that Taxi members are making versus what they get from royalty-free libraries, which I find ironic. A lot of microfilm producers think that they have to write quarterly royalty checks to the musicians. They don't understand the whole concept of performing rights organizations. Yeah. I think you and I spoke about that, and I want to do a thing at the Westin where we did the Road Rally in that 200-seat theater. Invite a bunch of active micro producers to come and understand the music side better than they do now. And you would be somebody I would love to have on stage for that. But so how do the people watching tonight's show break into that world of people producing micro budget films?
So I go back to what we were saying at the very beginning of the outset. You are breaking into the business of tomorrow, not the business of today. So today's producers, directors, people already have their relationships that they use, trust, had a good experience with. They're going to use that person again, and there's very little breaking into that. You need to think about who are the filmmakers, showrunners, even writers, because sometimes writers end up becoming writers, directors, content creators of tomorrow, which means you're probably putting yourself out there at film schools, at USC, at AFI, at UCLA, UCLA Extension, LA Film School, Chapman University down in Orange County. I'm being very Southern California centric here, but if there's a place, New York has there's production companies out of New York. Texas, Southern Texas probably has a lot of stuff. There's probably more video game stuff in Texas, actually. Even Nashville, which is the songwriter city, will have a lot of, fixers and music supervisors and people that are, it's a go-to place to look for songs for content.
Yeah.
And so and sometimes original songs created for movies. And so you have to think of where you're going to meet these people. Where are you going to meet filmmakers of tomorrow? They're probably going to be younger. I wouldn't focus on, freshman filmmakers at USC. Probably grad student people are about to, do an important grad film and then try to take it to Sundance or South by Southwest or something like that and get in that way. And make yourself known to them, and it could be as simple as a flyer with the stupid little email phone numbers dragging off the bottom. They call me.
I love it.
For your film, give me a call. Let's talk. I want to make relationships with filmmakers, but also know that one thing that I've learned doing this 25 years is that there is almost no independent film that is beneath a big name person doing the music for, if they love the story, if they want that relationship.
Wow.
And so you're competing against me. You're competing against Hans Zimmer. You're competing against Thomas Newman. And don't think just because it's a $1 million micro budget movie that those guys aren't going to do it. Of course they're going to do it. They're going to say yes. They're going to write a couple themes. They're going to have their team do it. But then they get to put the name music by Hans Zimmer on it. I mean, you've got James Horner, one of my favorite composers that kind of inspired me to want to get into this towards the end of his life, doing films like The Chum Scrubber, which was like this tiny independent film that went to Sundance, and that film had an amazing cast. Bonnie Curtis produced it. Like, how did they get all these people in there? That entire film was put together by, can you do me a favor? You can tell the
story was that good that people wanted to get involved?
Weird. It was weird, but people did it because of the relationships. We were in a business of relationships, both the acting people and the music people and everything. And James Horner probably was intrigued. He probably looked at who was producing it. He looked at who was in it. they probably said, we have no money or next to no money. And they said, yeah, I can do it, because he can afford to do it.
Right. That's the bottom line, is he's made enough money that if he has to spend 60 days on that film and he's losing out on something bigger. By the way, what does a James Horner, Hans Zimmer, what do they get paid for a major blockbuster film? A range.
Oh, good grief. I'm not looking at these contracts. I can only speculate at what they are.
Speculate.
However, there was a smokinggun.com release of a film budget for a film working title called The Woods, that anyone can go online right now and look. And this was the working title of The Village, M. Night Shyamalan's movie.
Okay.
So this is 20 plus years ago. And the entire film budget spreadsheet was released, leaked publicly. And you got to see what everybody made. There is a music section. So James Newton Howard, at that time, there's probably, if you're at the level of James Newton Howard or James Horner or John Williams, you're probably getting paid a creative fee. And then there's a separate line item for everything else, the production of it,
Mm-hmm.
Most composers are working on a package deal where you get paid, $100,000 to score a movie, but it's going to cost you $95,000 to produce the score to that movie.
Because you have to pay the string players, you have to pay everybody in the engineer, the studio, everything.
Everybody. So I end up making $5,000 to score a feature film, but I get a $100,000 score out of that. I can put on my demo reel and have a credit I'm proud of, right? So that is more often the norm today. But John Williams today is still even working as a creative fee that is a guaranteed income, and then there's the production of the rest of it, that Disney will still pay for Star Wars or whatever. So at the time, James Newton Howard was, I think it was like 1.5 million or something like that was his creative fee.
Wow.
And then on top of that, there was another almost $2 million of orchestra production costs. Now they had two different orchestras. They had a larger orchestra, and then they had a smaller string only orchestra. So they probably, these scenes need a large orchestra, but then these scenes just need a smaller string orchestra. We don't need the large orchestra sitting around not playing half the people, right? It's a waste of money. So we will record things out of order and do it in such a way that the large orchestra cues will be on days 1 and 2, and then the smaller orchestra cues will be days 3 and 4. So you produce the score in that way to kind of, intelligently spend your money. So you don't have, a brass and a woodwind section sitting around doing nothing for half the cue. When if they're there, they're getting paid to be there. So that's probably where you get, a creative line item for all the stuff. But so there's $3 million 20 plus years ago.
So you could triple that today.
Probably at the studio level, yeah. The games are spending just as much now on game scores as movies.
Oh, big time.
Before. So you've got games where composers are probably getting $300,000-$400,000 package deal to do, but the orchestra either has to come out of that if it's a smaller game, or if it's a AAA game is probably they're easily spending $1 million on that orchestra plus as well. And your composer's getting, a couple $100,000 to score it. In the independent film world, I think you're probably looking at a $10,000 a respectable low end to score a movie, but that's still a package, which means you're probably doing a MIDI score with maybe a couple soloists layered on top of that. And then, once you start wanting to have a live group or live, you could probably pull that off with an overseas recording. When you start getting into the 20,000 range, you can probably spend, maybe $10,000 on your orchestra with an overseas non-union Prague session, and do 1 3-hour session, and 3/4 of your score is omnisphere and MIDI and textures, and then the big cues that you need something is your live orchestra, and then you mix it all together and everybody thinks the whole thing is an orchestra.
That was my. We've only got a few minutes left. And my last question, my last topic was going to be about in the box versus live, because I remember 12, 15 years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine that owned probably one of the most popular or lucrative trailer houses, not trailer, a trailer music house. And he said everything, virtually everything had to be done live in the studio with real players. And the same thing for video games. Inan Zur, I've had him on stage at the Road Rally 2 or 3 times over the years, not in a while. But back then, I mean, to be Inan, you had to be able to conduct, which you can. You have to be able to go, okay, there's a rub, at bar 17, and have everybody. You need to speak the language of music in the way that the players can get it, blah, blah, blah. You're not one person sitting at a keyboard and a computer in your studio. Yeah. Nowadays, it appears to me, anecdotally, I don't have any hard evidence of this, but the vast majority of music, even for like AAA video games, big trailers, so much is being done in the box because the gear has gotten so much better, the samples are so much better, and people have learned how to use them really well over the years. So is that a true statement on my part that much more is being done in the box, which makes it feasible and affordable for a composer working on a micro budget film to not have to dump half of their budget, their music budget, into hiring live players, other than, like you said, hiring a violinist to just put a layer on and double track that, and a cellist, and blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. So I will always argue for including live musicians as much as possible. And if on a particular film, as much as possible is one live musician, a guitarist, a violinist, a cello, whatever, to just perform on top of my MIDI orchestra, then that's what that is. But having said that, I will make the argument, and so I'm sharing this, you all can make the same arguments if you can grasp onto this concept, that the notes that I write for the score is not the score. It is the roadmap to the performance of the score. What the score is, what the music is what happens between the notes. It's what you do from this note to that note to the crescendo of that note. It's the performance of those notes, and the roadmap we create is just kind of how we explain to a musician we want this performed or that performed, right? So there is a human element to the performance of that I don't bring that to the table. That's what an amazing master at that instrument brings to the table, and they do infuse a life into this. That the score is the emotional character of your movie. It is a character like an actor. Your director should be directing you not unlike they direct their actors. I want this scene to feel sad. I want this scene to feel anxious. I want the audience to feel scared here, and then how do you interpret that musically is your score. And so I would argue that to bring that human emotional element into the music, you need humans emoting and performing those notes. And a computer, no matter how good the MIDI samples are, is never going to be emoting or performing like a human can, because like we were talking about being a composer and infusing your history and your background and everything else into what you write, a musician is doing that same thing into everything they play. And they are playing with a style. There are some musicians that just have a sweet sound to that instrument that they play that has come from their background in jazz or whatever, or that has influenced how they play that instrument. And by including them, you're basically infusing your score with that expression as well. So that is, to me, the argument, to always have as much human performance as you can. The great thing about the MIDI being so good, and about our ear, if you understand the physics of our ear, is we can blur the line between what is real and what is not fairly simple, because the human ear will listen to a soloist or guitarist or a violin or even a singer and go, now that's real. I can hear them breathing. That's real. So the whole thing must be real, right? So you have a couple solos on top of your MIDI strings or whatever it is, and percussion is probably the easiest thing to do MIDI because it's just a hit and a decay. It's not a massaging of a string or notes or bending or whatever.
Even just
So
an egg shaker really makes a difference.
it does. And so the human element can be, to us as a listener or a watcher of a movie, can be blurred to think that the whole thing is real just because we have a couple of live soloists layered on top of our MIDI orchestra. And that is a great way to make your budget on a lower independent film, or even a studio level film. If your string orchestra was just going to be playing chords on this particular cue anyway to set kind of a pad underneath a very expressive guitar thing, then don't waste the money on stage doing that one particular cue with what you can produce in your own studio, and just have the soloist come in and do the very expressive melody thing on top of string pads. I mean, Hans Zimmer is famous for that. His sample libraries that were custom for only him are often the final product. And if he's hiring a live orchestra, it's not to replace samples, it's kind of to add to the samples. Like the samples are in that recording as well, and that's part of his sound. And so infusing the human element into what you do, I think, will further give you an advantage. And you're just adding the talent of all these musicians to the product of what you produce. It's making you better.
From your mouth to God's ears, because we've gone full circle today, back to humans again. And people say this all the time. Well, it won't be able to mimic the human touch. But an egg shaker makes a difference. Yeah. What about somebody playing $75,000 cello that's been playing it for 30 years? That's a difference.
Yeah, the tone of that instrument is different. A percussionist, they shake that thing, they're slightly ahead of the beat or slightly behind the beat or whatever, and they have the groove to it that is so hard to sit there and spend a day programming, and it'll never groove, right? And so it's because computers are very dumb, but they're very patient.
Yeah.
And we are very smart and very impatient. That's why computers, work well with us, because they will sit there and they will run their program and do that dumb thing over and over and over and over and over again, very patiently, until, and follow the instruction set or the way it's programmed, whatever, to infinity. But they don't do what they're not programmed to do. And that's where we need to use our smarts and our ingenuity and invent and create, and then use the computers to kind of as a tool for us, but they are not creating for us. And so
before we go, give us all your info. I rarely endorse anything, and if I do, it's because I feel it right here. And I have not taken your class, but I've spent hours speaking with you, both in front of the camera and not, or in front of an audience or not. And everybody watching this show today, and everybody who's going to watch the video later, you now have the evidence. This is a man whose course you should take, because you will learn a lot. You are not a typical college professor type at all. You're teaching real world, not just regurgitating stuff out of a book. So tell us the website, all that stuff.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. So that business of film music course, I do my own private version of that. I say private in that, there will be a class. I've sometimes had 2 people in the class. I've sometimes had, 12 people in the class. It varies based on the season, who wants to sign up for it. But if the main website for that is filmmusic.business. But I've set up a special website for Taxi members. They both will get to the same place.
Okay.
But it really kind of forwards to my website. So
and I'm not, let everybody know, we don't make a penny off. Taxi doesn't make a penny, right?
No, nothing.
Okay.
And I appreciate the endorsement. If you go to brianralston.com, which is my website, /taxi, all lowercase, that will take you to a special version of the page. And on there, I have a coupon code written out so that you all can get $50 off the $395 price of the course. For that $395, So $350 for taxi if you enter the coupon. And I'll tell you the coupon in a second. Basically, I do a 12-hour live taught. It's not pre-recorded. It's me just like now, and we get to talk and interact. A 12-hour Zoom-based course over a couple days that goes through the business of all of this. And we talk about contracts. We talk about philosophy. We talk about a lot of these issues that we've talked about here, even in more depth. I give everybody a copy of my keynote slides for the sessions that I do. Everybody will get a work for hire contract that was developed by an attorney. You will get a license agreement that was developed by an attorney that are used for film scoring and film composers. I will, always tell you that these contracts, you should have your attorney look at them when you use them, because they might need to be updated for your specific project to make sense for that. But they are a great starting place, and they were created by attorneys to begin with. So we will talk about the difference between a work for hire and a license agreement, and what that means for you in owning your score content on if you were to score a film. We will talk about business philosophy. We will talk about I usually, if her schedule permits, my attorney will come in and will actually give a little shout out for 15 or 20 minutes to the class. And she in the past has offered, a consultation with everybody that takes my class. So you can, consult with her on a project that she will help walk you through. I also bring in a music contractor that hires musicians in Los Angeles, and she will, present what she does and how to get a hold of her. And she usually gives kind of a little discount friend rate to people that take my course as well. So you will get the videos of what we do to keep in perpetuity. You can download them. You can keep them. I put them on Vimeo for a while so you can go capture them. And then what I've started to do now, this is a little unique, but hopefully it will be helpful. I use Digital Performer for all my DAW stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the DAW flavor of this generation that's out there now. A lot of people are using Logic or Cubase. I'm always happy to talk about Digital Performer and why I choose that. But I will actually give everybody also a copy of my Digital Performer template, my composing template.
Nice.
Even if you don't use it, you can get the free version of DP, the trial version, and open it and see how it's organized and see how I route everything so that I record all of my stems in literally one pass. I use Vienna Ensemble Pro to host most of my orchestra stuff. And you'll get to see all of that routings in my template and how I do that. Every film, I tweak it to be specific for that film. So if I'm not using choir on a film, I turn off all the choir stuff and it just doesn't load. But at the same time, it's pretty much a good solid part of what my template is. And then I give everyone who takes my course also 1 free hour one-on-one with me after the 12 hours.
All this for $350, my friend. I think you are underpricing yourself.
If I want people to take it. I want people to learn. I think we're better as a community if we understand the business side of what we do. I really believe that. And you get these contracts. I mean, $350 is not even going to pay for an hour of an attorney's time, but you get a contract that you can actually. It's a good starting point. Give it to your attorney and say, here's a work for hire. This is a good starting point. Tweak this for modern AI language or whatever, and go from there. And so that one-on-one time, we'll talk about anything. If you don't live in LA, we'll Zoom for an hour and we'll talk about anything you want, philosophy, whatever. I'll listen to your demo. It doesn't matter. If you live in LA, let's go have coffee.
Okay.
And that's fine. So the coupon code is TAXI, all lowercase, TAXI Road Rally 2025. So TAXI Road Rally 2025. And you enter that when you book the course. I have 2 versions of the course coming up. I have one December 11th starting. So 11th and 12th, 9 to noon. We do 2 days in the morning. And then we take a week off and we come back. And on I think it's the 18th, 19th. So that's a week later. Thursday, Friday later, we do 9 to noon again. And so there's 4 days, 3 hours per day. And then in January, I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to have 2 back-to-back Sundays. So I think it's I have it on the website. I think it's the January 18th and then whatever 7 days after that, whatever those Sundays are, we're going to actually do a 12-hour day. So we'll do a 3 hour in the morning, take an hour off for lunch, do a 3 hour in the afternoon, and then 2 6-hour days, you can get it all done on a weekend.
Well,
and,
I would love to take it. Maybe I can get a $75 discount. I cannot thank you enough. Seriously, I'm not blowing any smoke. And now the people who've watched you for 90 minutes see what I see in you. We're becoming friends, but even if we weren't, I'm just really grateful for the way you articulate things. You clearly, most people who have such a deep understanding can't spit it back out, where other people who don't operate at that same level can get it. And you do that really well. So any course you teach, I would love to take.
Thank you.
I will see you sometime in the new year, probably talk to you before then. Thank you so much for taking 90 minutes out of your busy week to do this with me, and I will talk to you soon. Oh, also, Liz has been putting your stuff in the chat, but we'll also put it in the description under the video for people who weren't here for the live show today. With that, I thank all of you guys who watched the show today. Don't miss next week. I'm going to have the Music Licensing Collective on to explain what they do, and so you can find out. It doesn't cost you anything to join the MLC. You might have a few bucks, or you might have a few $1,000 just sitting there with your name not attached to it, and eventually it goes elsewhere. So you got to jump on it. So don't miss that show. And Brian, I will talk to you when I talk to you, my friend. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brian Ralston.